And by the way, I don't want to cure my ADHD because one of my biggest talents that, well, all ADHD people have, even though it can backfire on us, is divergent thinking. We are divergent thinking, phenomenal experts.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. This is Sarah Box, your host, and we are here for another great No Labels, No Limits conversation. However, this week is a little different. I'm interviewing two different people. Actually, it's going to be a conversation. So I have some questions. They can each ask questions of the other person as well. These are two of my recent new friends and favorite people in the way they come about how our brains work, how we're wired, the uniqueness of each of us, and how that contributes to the whole of us. So with that, as a brief introduction, I would like to introduce you to Jole Berlage-Buccellati. I always do your name wrong, Jole. Berlage-Buccellati. You could say it. And Tamara Rosier. And Tamara trained me on her name, so I have that down. So would each of you, and Jole, would you start, please? Would each of you introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background and what you do, and then we'll get into the conversation, okay?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. And thank you for having me again on the show. So my name is Jole. I live in Hamburg, Germany. And I'm a coach for highly sensitive people. And I center around two topics. One is the trauma. So I do trauma-informed coaching and therapy because that is a really, really big issue with highly sensitive people, unfortunately. And the second thing I center around is that I think that the highly sensitive people are the missing link in the discussion in our society, and that we really need to step up and have the guts to show who we are and take part in the discussion. So I work with a lot of highly sensitives who would identify as change leaders or change makers, helping them to get over trauma and other limiting beliefs that keep them from thriving and having their voice heard.
Thanks, Jole. Tamara?
I'm Tamara Rosier, and my career began in teaching high school, and then I moved to higher ed and taught and did some leadership things in higher ed for quite a while. And then I became an ADHD coach and started the ADHD Center of West Michigan. I've written 2 books now, Your Brain's Not Broken. And my newest book is You, Me, and Our ADHD Family. And that book talks about, so you're in a neurodiverse family. What do we do with that?
Okay.
That's it.
So let's start with a simple question from the purview of the listener, okay? And that is, how do you define ADHD and highly sensitive? So we talked about right before we hit record, Jole, you mentioned that you used to refer to ADD, you have some characteristics. And I think there's a number of us who don't really understand, I'm putting myself in the number of us group, some of the finer distinctions between how each of you use your language so that we can kind of talk cross-platform if we're using a computer analogy.
Yeah, I love that you're asking this question. Jole, if you don't mind, I'd like to go first and then have you build on what I say. Research has just blossomed about ADHD. And so now that we can see the brain, we can see things happening in the brain, we're really more convinced about what's happening. And so there's brain differences that we see in individuals with ADHD. So what happens is, and Sarah, your listeners might remember, because I'm going to nerd out again just for a few moments, but not, I'll come right back. If your listeners tap on their forehead, that is their prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is it's like the conductor for the orchestra. It kind of directs your brain. It remembers to plan. It's the seat of short-term memory, working memory, emotional regulation, all really nifty things to have in a modern world. And the research is that those of us with ADHD have poor access to our prefrontal cortex, which means it's unreliable access. We still have one, but it's an unreliable connection. And so what we do instead is we begin to rely on a different part of our brain. And so now if your listener cups their ear, that's approximately where the limbic system is. And the limbic center is the seat where the amygdala is. And remember, a lot of us know this, the amygdala is where we sense fight, flight, freeze, or appease. It's where we sense there's a danger. And those of us, and research keeps backing this up, those of us with ADHD, we're in high alert a lot. We're trying to constantly scan our environment. Are we in danger? Are we in danger? Those people without ADHD don't need to constantly scan. Their prefrontal cortex says, stand down, we're safe. And what happens is, once our brains sense danger, oh, by the way, danger can be anything from missing a homework assignment to running late for a dentist appointment, that's enough to send our amygdala into this kind of panic zone, right? Then those of us with ADHD attach an emotion to that. And then we go through life having a lot of emotions. And one of the reasons why I'm interested in this conversation is some people will say, oh, I think ADHD is my gift. And I will say it is not a gift. It is a difference. And we are finding that ADHD people are neurologically more sensitive. And this comes down to our gut biome, our nervous system, and etc. Okay, now you, Jole.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. Yeah, I think we both know that there are a lot of similarities and overlap. And thank you for that explanation. I think that was very, very easy to understand. And I think since a lot of HSPs also have ADD or similar conditions that mimic something like ADD due to trauma, I think that is something that really needs to be talked about, because I think some of the similarities that exist between people that have ADHD and HSP are actually due to trauma. And I would really love to see more research on that, because when I was reading through this list, I mean, the trauma therapist in me said, tick the box, tick the box, tick the box. And it's probably very early trauma. So it would be very interesting to find out more. That is one of the things Sarah and I talked about, to find out, what happens in very early development. So I would say that in the case of, let's say, an HSP that only carries that trait, at the moment, it is said that it's a neurodiversity. It's not that there's something wrong with the person. It's just a different kind of wiring. And I've actually lately heard that about ADHD as well. So it's very interesting to hear your point on that. And I would say that a lot of the things that are similar, like the creative part, the part of being able to actually experience more than other people can, are by degrees different. For example, the emotionality of highly sensitive people, that emotional reactivity is really about the depth of emotion. We really go deep, dig deep into that emotion. But we can actually pop out of it. If we're not traumatized, we can pop out of it very quickly again. Yeah. So you will find a lot of artists and musicians and people that do that by default, going into deep emotions. You will find that they're highly sensitive people. Where I understand that with ADHD, it is more of a complete overwhelm that creates the emotional reactivity. So maybe correct me with that, but I think that is, one of the points where it looks similar, but it's actually not the same. So over to you, Tamara.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't realize if you, I think that's a wonderful way of distinguishing. I do want to add, those of us with ADHD, we're low-hanging fruit for trauma because we don't have, Sarah could just hear your listeners like, wait, I was just getting clarity on this. But we're going to kind of mess things up before we can clear it, and then we'll probably mess it up again. ADHD people, because we don't have the protection of the prefrontal cortex saying, no, you don't have to have a big emotion about this. And when I say big emotion, I mean, I have big emotions about everything. It's like my 5 senses are turned up too high. And what Jole just referred to is sometimes that's overwhelming for me. Now, I'm a grown woman. I can sit through meetings without, having to kick off my shoe. But am I going to sit and think, wow, I tied my left shoe too tight today. I tied my shoe too tight. I wish the shoe wasn't on my foot. Darn it, the shoe is on my foot. And now that light's buzzing. What the heck is up with that light? It's my prefrontal cortex doesn't go, hey, how about we just not pay attention to your shoe for a moment and listen to the person speaking? And so what Jole said is all that coming into me, it makes me incredibly overwhelmed. Now, I'd like to add something here. It's work that I've been slowly building on. I think we're going to be reading more about this in the ADHD community. Bill Dotson suggests that we have a different type of nervous system. And what I find similar to HSP is I need to re-regulate my nervous system frequently. Now, I'm a person who has ADHD, and I should tell you early trauma. And so the reason I say that is my ACE score isn't so high. ACEs, well, Jole, maybe you want to explain the ACE score. Maybe you'll do it better.
I think you can do that better than I can.
Oh, okay. Well, we give the ACE score at the ADHD Center, and it's adverse childhood events. And that gives us an idea of the person's background. And it has things like, was a parent an alcoholic? Have you seen someone murdered? Like it's a whole list of adverse events. Those affect us. And so we give it because those of us with ADHD, without the prefrontal cortex, trauma does affect us. And trauma, it doesn't take a lot of trauma to affect us. Go ahead, Jole.
Tamara, because I found this discussion so interesting. The route I've been going down is more to actually understand where does this diverse wiring come from, and I think the nature and nurture debate is not over yet in that sense. So I sense that there is probably early trauma, early trauma in utero actually involved in that alternate wiring, be it ADHD or HSP. So, some of it might be genetic, but I think that at a certain point, something happens that influences the development of the nervous system, the way it actually ripens or doesn't, fully do what it's supposed to do. Then there is discussion, at least with ADHD, is with the retained primitive reflexes. On that, yes. Which in my case, since I, also am an ADD person, I struggle with that. Actually, maybe you can help me because now it's all put under one umbrella, but to me, it's still two different things. And I worked with somebody here on those primitive retained reflexes, and that condition has actually improved a lot. There were quite a lot of things that I couldn't do before that would overwhelm me, that when that got sort of fixed or integrated, I feel a lot better, I really have to say.
So I'm going to ask you to give an example of that, Jole, so that someone is going, okay, I get it, but what are those fixed primitive like, what do you mean by that? In case someone's not, like, they go, I think I know, but I'm...
a piece of paper here, typically ADD, because in the moment that I need it, I can't remember it. So that is one strategy. Get a piece of paper and write it down somewhere so you don't freak out and you go even more down more loopholes of not remembering because you can't reach your prefrontal cortex. So here it is. It's an involuntary motor responsive originating in the brainstem, present after birth, and they are there in early child development actually to facilitate your survival. So, for example, that reflex, it's the palmar grasp reflex. It's almost like monkeys that you hold on to anything. Yeah. Then there is this moral reflex that people still go into if they stay in the shock state. Yeah, and it's a very early reflex, and it's a movement like this, and it is actually, if it's not integrated, it will mess up your neck and your back and your whole movement patterns. And then they say there are 6 primary ones, and the lady I worked with said there were 18. And now, me being me, guess how many from 18 were not okay? In my case, there were 17. So she said, "How did you get through life?"
Right.
So I think there are many, many different angles in this discussion that could and should be looked at. It's not, I keep saying we need to be really humble in, questions because there's so much we don't yet know.
So I'd like to circle back, if we could, to the nature nurture. What Barkley estimates that if your dad has ADHD, you have a 0.8 or higher likelihood of having ADHD. If your mom has ADHD, you have a 0.6. So that's, for those of you listening, it's 60% and 80%. So that's a high hereditary component. But here's what I'm finding and what the research bears out. We have protective features. So those of us with ADHD, we are born with those primitive reflexes. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And yet some of us, our protective features will help us not rely on them as much. And so protective features are like, do you have a stable family? Do you have do you go to school? Are your parents helping you study? Do you have a high enough social economic status? All these protective features, I find really help people. And my heart breaks for people with low protective features. They didn't have a shot. Whereas some of us just have just enough, right? And when you were saying, the therapist said to you, "How did you get this far?" My first thought was probably she had some great protective features along the way.
Yes and no, but I had a lot of trauma to get through. So maybe some of it is sheer willpower. But
I was going to say IQ is a very protective feature. And
yes, probably it is.
Yes.
But what I was going to say is that, to bring that also into discussion, is that trauma actually affects the same area of the brain that you were talking about. So it's not that easy to differentiate either for highly sensitive people nor for ADHD, how much of that is actually due to trauma and how much, to that inherent was something that you got from your parents or that just happened to be, or, you had a toxic environment, this and that. And so when I work with people, the first thing I do is I check trauma and I try and take as much of the trauma out of the equation. And then what remains is maybe part of the personality or the life story that just person needs to find a way to live with.
That's interesting. This may not be the part of the conversation where I should ask you this, but what role do you think personality plays in this?
Well, you probably would have to define personality.
Yeah.
So
Let's just define it using the big five, just very basic. For the listeners, big five is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
So I think personality is whatever talents or quirks, I would define it that way, talents or quirks,
Okay.
problems we have just simply by having come to this world with a certain genetic makeup. Meaning, if I am, for example, very highly sensitive and I'm very aware of the emotions of other people, that doesn't actually need to lead to overwhelm. Maybe that's the point I want to make. Yeah, it leads to overwhelm if I don't know anything about my energy body. It leads into overwhelm if I'm in a toxic environment. It leads to overwhelm if I've been bullied. It leads to overwhelm if I don't understand how to maintain my own inner self, my inner core. So in itself, let's say the personality aspect of being a sensitive person or even a very sensitive person in itself is just a part of my personality or my temperament, but it's not a problem. Yeah. Whereas, or let's say I'm a very musical person, or I'm somebody who's very interested in numbers, or I'm somebody who's a really good listener. These are, I would say, they're gifts that you have, but they are not something caused by trauma. They are deformed by trauma.
Informed. And so now I see where you're going with this, and I see this a little bit differently. And I'd love to run it by you. If you imagined a Venn diagram and ADHD is in one circle and your personality is in the other. And I work with enough people, they interact with their ADHD differently. So, all right, I'm going to be too vulnerable and regret this later, but I hate the weakness I feel when I experience my ADHD. Or I'm also highly sensitive. I hate that as a weakness. And so in my personality, I go to my personality and go, hey, what do we have in our toolbox to hide all this? And so I respond and react differently, where someone else may go, I need to search for help in someone.
Yeah, I agree.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, so let me ask a question before Jole kind of respond to that. So your response because of not liking that aspect or feeling that, is it not the aspect of your personality or the feelings that brings up?
I think I really do want to hear what Jole wants to say, so I don't want to push my answer here, but for me, I see different types of personalities. And like the person who's highly conscientious might go, well, I just have to problem solve my way out of this. And they approach it differently. Okay. Whereas I am like, well, screw this vulnerability. I will just tighten down the hatches and never let anyone know I have ADHD. You see,
right. I got it.
And I agree, personality is formed. But so, Jole, I'm so interested in your point of view.
Putting these strings together, and also for the people listening. So let's take for example that aspect of disorganization. Okay. Which we could say there are some people that by nature are more organized than others. Yeah. Or prefer to have a tidy room, and other people say, I really care. Okay. So under normal circumstances, let's say one of my children is rather untidy, and I find that horrible, but she doesn't. So I can't say that is pathological. You know, it's just the way she is. So it doesn't mean that she's actually disorganized in her brain. It just means that she has a different sense of our environment should be or structured or
Yes.
whatever. Okay.
Hey there, everybody. I want to take just a minute out of this episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast to tell you that we are officially opening the Sandbox membership in September. So if you're not already on our mailing list, please click the link below to either sign up for the membership or get on the waiting list for the membership. And if you click the link, you'll find more information about what's included, what our plans are, and better yet, you'll be on early enough to help decide what is most important to you to experience in the first 3 to 6 months of the membership. So don't wait. Click the link below and join us in the Sandbox where fun happens. We get to do a little R&R, little learning, support one another, and really grow and expand in ourselves, in our lives, and impact the world in a profound way. So come on over, join us.
So I needed to learn, for example, that disorganization part that I sometimes have has nothing to do with my HSP part. It has to do with having had a very severe father. Yeah. Growing up in an environment where you could never get anything right. It was always wrong, no matter what you did. So that has nothing to do with my personality. I might actually be tidier than I would be by nature, just simply because of that. Mm-hmm. And there's an aspect of the ADD that needed to be looked at in terms of disorganization, but that has a different source. And I find that when I work with my clients, I try and get an overview of what belongs where, because it needs a different kind of treatment. So the ADHD aspect needs a different kind of attention than whatever disorganization I might have because my dad was that way. So maybe that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, that's really interesting. What's happening right now in the field of ADHD is there's a lot of attention being paid to emotional dysregulation. And it wasn't given much attention before 5 years ago. In fact, my book was one of the first books that started to talk about emotional dysregulation and ADHD. I was really nervous putting that out because I thought, oh dear, I could get shot down for this. But the research was there, right? So something that many ADHD coaches talk about is we coach from the back of the brain forward. And what we mean by that is we have to start coaching the emotional dysregulation first. I go through life having big emotions about everything, right? I'm too hot, big emotion about that. Or a lot of ADHD people are easily hurt through criticism, and they'll harbor those feelings of resentment. And it's the brain trying to protect itself and all that. But we have to coach the emotional regulation techniques before we can coach the prefrontal cortex techniques, like organizing your life and moving through life, at least modern life, more successfully.
Yeah, because emotions overrule the frontal brain. It just makes
all
sense.
The time. Yes. Yeah. So when you coach your HSP people, how do you start, or where do you see the primary?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I really always start with the point that there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Where I start.
Your brain's not broken.
That's the pain point.
Yeah.
That's the pain point. Then I point out that, at least in the case of high sensitivity, it is a gift because there are so many aspects of high sensitivity that are just wonderful. Then they also need regulation at some certain points, but a non-traumatized HSP doesn't get overwhelmed that easily.
Right.
And that's a bit, okay?
Yes.
And the next thing is I do address the body. So in a way I do, this bottom up, if you want to. I look at the nervous dysregulation. I look at limiting beliefs. I look at chronic arousal. I look at, and I like this English word, unhelpful feeling patterns. And then I do something which not a lot of HSP coaches do. So I would like to take the opportunity to mention that is I look at the energy body, because it is my belief that we are electromagnetic beings. And I think that the antennas that highly sensitive people have for information, that is actually the medium. It's not just that we read facial expressions really well or body language or something. We just have this uncanny sense, and it needs to come from somewhere. And my hypothesis is it is the energy body. And a lot of the emotional overwhelm actually goes to the energetic body. So that's the basis of what I look at. I don't know how you do that, but
I love what you just said, because a little light bulb just went out in my heart actually, because I said I'm HSP, and I know things, and my husband will look at me, who also has ADHD, will go, "How do you know that? How would one know that?" And I really don't know how. And I'm not talking supernatural, a hurricane's coming. It's just this. Well, I don't know how I know this. It just picked up. What's fast? Yeah, it's just I picked it up. I reoriented it in my brain somehow, and I have very sensitive antenna. And what's fascinating for me is when I coach my clients, I can tell who's HSP and I can tell who's not. And that is exactly, I hired a coach in the center who's also HSP. Now, the language she uses is empath. That's a little woo-woo language, I know. I'd like to hear the difference, but she just knows things about her clients. And I thought everyone coached like that. Like, I thought everyone just had that intuitive nature where I thought, what's so hard about coaching? This is easy. You just whatever the client brings, you use. And they hardly ever bring words. They're bringing all this energy with them. And I didn't understand that this wasn't part of the ADHD experience until very recently, when I was looking at my husband going, gosh, how can you be so dumb? Like, this is very obvious.
Yes, exactly.
And
it's obvious. But that's
it's obvious. And my 3 children are HSP, and we'll talk about it. We talk about it amongst ourselves. And we have antenna, and that's
absolutely. And that would be one way of explaining it. And that is science. I mean, this is not woo-woo. Yeah. And I loved, Sarah, you were laughing because I could see you sit there. Yes, I know about that antenna. We talked about that.
It's so fun.
Yeah, this is obviousness, isn't it?
Yes. But you know what? I so appreciate the conversation the two of you are having, because there's just little nuances, differences between the two, and it's so easy to assume one thing that might just mimic another thing. So like you were saying about your husband, Tamara, how can you not see this? Right. Because it's so obvious to you. Now, Jole has, she really has this deep belief that I believe, it's one of those things I'm thinking she's onto something, that this HSP component is super important for us moving through the world we're entering into now, or have been going kind of mucking ourselves the way through the last many years. But Jole, would you talk a little bit about that and the change maker thing? Because I think, for number one, I think Tamara will find it interesting, but I'll bet she comes up with some questions for you about it.
Yeah, and vice versa, I'm sure. So yeah, thank you, Sarah. I would just like to return briefly, because it's part of the discussion, that empath that you were talking about. I think the discussion of empath is not woo at all. I think there's actually a confusion about high sensitivity and high empathy. Again, I think they're actually 2 different things, but they can overlap. So I came up with this, and Sarah knows this, I came up with this, at the moment, very basic sort of spectrum of high sensitivity. And high empathy is just one possible aspect that can be mixed in. So there are highly sensitive people that are not very empathic, but they still have those antennas. And then you have empaths that are highly empathic, but they have that partial sensitivity for that kind of energy and for giving themselves actually to somebody else to do this service aspect for other people. So I think there's still lots of work to be done to actually, again, and maybe that's just how my brain works, to actually understand separate components of things rather than having just one category for everyone.
I love what you're saying here, though. So here's what I think you said. There's like a scale of how sensitive, right? But then there's also how we tune in differently. So I see this in my children. One of my children is a chiropractor, and she's very good at healing because it's almost like she can feel where the client's pain is. Now, she's highly trained, but she's like, no, there's something that goes beyond the training that I can't put my finger on. It's something. And so she has that, whereas, another daughter may have more of a sensitivity spiritually. And it's a true sensitivity. And you said something that I really like that you're legitimizing in my head. It's like feeling an energy and feeling the different energies. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think that is essentially what high sensitivity is about, really. It's one of the essential core elements. So if we would go back to that spectrum that I have in my mind at the moment, then it has, it has those central aspects, and then it has aspects added on, for example, high empathy, and then, or high potential. Not every highly sensitive person also is a high potential person. That is also many times mixed. Yeah. And the other aspect that Sarah was talking about is the change maker and change leader aspect. So one of the core components of highly sensitive people, in my view, is that we all carry this aspect of something's wrong here. We can feel that something's off. And as a general rule, because we're so creative and we're so good at complex thinking, we want to come up with solutions. We were like, we can't stay here. I mean, there are other possibilities. Let's do something about that. And then there are those that actually then say, because they carry that aspect, in addition, I'm the one who's going to lead in this. Even if I'm highly sensitive, even if I get easily or more easily overwhelmed, or I go down too many rabbit holes at the same time, I'm going to take the responsibility to organize this change, to bring that impulse into the world. And that's what I think, what you're referring to. And not every highly sensitive person has that complete aspect. They have this aspect of, let's get together and change something, or they have the aspect of something's off here, but they don't necessarily have that part of their personality, to go back to that, to say, raise their arm and say, I'm going to do it. So Tamara,
I like that. I like that a lot. You and I both have trauma. One of my goals in my family, and I've talked about it with my children, is the idea of it stops here. The generations of abuse, emotional abuse, stops here. And I wasn't a perfect parent. My children are all in their 20s and 30s now. So I can say they turned out to be good humans and breathe a sigh of relief. But they all knew my mission was, it stops here.
Right.
And I'm resetting the generations.
That is a huge task.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I've done it perfectly, but that was that was born in me at a young age.
Exactly.
Yeah. I write about it.
Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It's me.
Yes.
I'm sorry. The Italian part of me keeps interrupting. I'm sorry.
Oh, please do. I love it.
Sorry. It's but it's that mission that I'm talking about. It's that impulse that many highly sensitive people carry, that they say, I have this thing that keeps coming back that I actually need to do. Yeah, I don't necessarily need to lead in it, but there's something that, if you want to use that word, my soul wants to do. And in your case, one of the things was, it stops here. I have the ability to do this. I have everything I need, and I decide I'm going to do this because this is my gift for the generations that come after me. And that's a hell of a mission.
I knew it at 7 years old.
See?
And so what I'm saying is I wasn't smart enough at 7 years old. I just knew it was my mission. Right?
Right.
Yeah. So that really hits home when you say that. I'm wondering, and I'm just wondering this out loud, and I'm wondering if most HSPs have trauma or ADHD.
I think most highly sensitive people, and I like Sarah's question about our society and what we need to change, carry trauma, and a lot of trauma. And if it's just having been bullied or having had this sense of, I'm different and I'm not heard and I'm not seen as a rule. And then you can add all the other kinds of trauma of, your parents fighting, alcohol, somebody being incarcerated, divorce, abuse of all kinds, trauma in utero if your mother had stress. Some children born in war zones. Imagine what that does, to a nervous system that had not fully developed. So yes, I think the way our society and our world is organized right now, it's very hard for somebody who's so sensitive not to be traumatized.
Well, I think that assumption, join what you're saying and then adding on to it our immediate connectivity to everything right now is traumatizing in and of itself, right? Just that someone can ping you or ding you or you're going to here's a piece of information that you're not prepared for and you're not even emotionally, you're not grounded for, and boom, it's in you. And I don't want to overstate that, but honestly, you can feel like your body just getting slammed with something because someone offhandedly said, I got to tell you about this terrible thing I just saw. Those are words for me when someone says, I have to tell you about a terrible thing I just saw. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it because I always feel terrible. Always. There's not one time someone has said that I felt great afterward. A terrible thing I just saw. Could you keep it to yourself or process it appropriately?
Yeah,
right.
And if you are an empath, if you're highly sensitive and carry a lot of empath parts in you as well, which you probably do, Sarah, it does a lot more damage to you than it would be to somebody who's not structured that way.
Well, yeah, I have to start my day over and go, okay, let's get grounded.
Yeah.
Let's get recentered. Let's talk about what's true. You can't do anything about that. But then my mind goes, what kind of person are you that shares that kind of information? There are other options to talk to people about except terrible things you just saw. Or, so that's just me going off on that. But I do think in our world today, there's so much of that coming in about what's terrible, what's wrong. We're on the edge of this imminent disaster. And yet I sit here with two brilliant women talking about hope, of looking at things differently and maybe understanding one another in different ways. But I think about my grandkids who are on social media and then the research on just how, when Jole, you were saying you feel invisible or different, how can you not feel invisible or different when things are screenshotted or photoshopped and put up and you see this tiny little piece of someone's life, but you don't see what else is in the iceberg under the surface. And for me, that just gets fired up, you guys. So, would you talk about some of that, the whole social piece and folks? Tamara, you were going to say something?
I'd love to hear Tamara on that because we spoke a lot about high sensitivity now, and I have tons of questions about ADHD. So why don't you take over?
Well, there's so many. I've been so fascinated listening to you, and it's just so. I'm sorry, my brain is going in so many directions because there's so.
No, I love that.
Because there's so many things And it is difficult. And I like how you try to separate, because, I'm showing up 3 for 3 in our 3 categories: trauma, HSP, and ADHD. And when I was writing my books, I had to remember that I was writing to a non-HSP group who still had big emotions about everything, who could still have rejection sensitivity. That doesn't make them HSP. And so it's interesting, trying to write to the ADHD population and removing all that from my experience. And yet I do know I did let some of the trauma in. And so I alluded to it in my second book. I downplayed the situation a lot. And that's because we know in ADHD families, there's a high risk of emotional abuse, physical abuse, alcoholism. We just know that goes hand in hand. So, this is a great conversation, and I so appreciate this. So what's one of the questions that you have?
Well, I always hear that ADHD, that's always such a mouthful for me, cannot really be cured. So when I experienced this therapy with the primitive retained reflexes and I felt better by degrees, I was like, you're the specialist in that. Do you believe that? Do you believe it cannot be? I mean, it probably can't be completely healed, but is there a way that we can learn to regulate enough so it doesn't keep interfering in a toxic way with our lives?
Mm-hmm. I do. I really do. And here's how I talk about it with my clients. They show up and they're barely surviving. And my goal isn't to change their brain structure, but the goal is to move them from surviving to thriving. So I would say I'm an example of a person with ADHD who's thriving. By the way, some people will say, oh, you can't write a book because you have ADHD. Well, guess what I did? But I will always struggle with short attention, my short-term memory, rather. So my short-term memory is like, okay, I just put down the remote. Where is that remote? Because I have no memory. And frankly, the remote's not that important to remember, right? So I do spend a lot of time going, okay, remote, come here, remote, or with other things. Now, I don't lose my keys. The only reason I don't lose my keys is because I have keyless entry to my car. So my keys just stay in my purse, and it happens all by magic. And so I'm in thriving, but I haven't gotten rid of all my ADHD deficits. I've just made my environment work better for me. And it's very sensitive. Now, I think you're onto something with reprogramming the nervous system. Again, I still see deficits in people who do the reprogramming of their nervous system, but I see definite improvement. And so what I'm trying to say is I try to move my clients out of this surviving, fighting every day for survival and overwhelm and anguish and to move them through, how do I account for the fact that I'm very sensitive? How do I account for the fact that I have big emotions about everything? How do I account for this? And so I do that with my clients through using metaphors but the thing is, it's not to get rid of it. It's to make the butterflies fly in formation and just to get me through the day. Now, by the way, I will say it's harder, and this isn't a sad story, but it's harder for me to look normal than it is for other people. I was in DC a couple weeks ago, and I was with ADHD experts from all over the US, and they were talking about ADHD, and I was there as the lived experience person. And every morning we'd leave the hotel, and for some reason, these people just knew when to leave, how to leave. They just knew these things, the what, how, and when, that I always kind of grasp with, right? So I'm not saying that will be suddenly cured, but I have enough systems in place where it's not causing me to stumble every day. And so that's what I mean by, and by the way, I don't want to cure my ADHD, because one of my biggest talents that, well, all ADHD people have, even though it can backfire on us, is divergent thinking. We are divergent thinking, phenomenal experts. You say, can you tell me how these two things are related? And we're like, of course we can, because we can draw these wild connections in our head. And again, that's when I look at non-ADHD people, I'm like, well, how can you not think of this idea? Right? It's so obvious. So I actually, go ahead, Jolie.
It's the same with HSP. We have that ability for complex thinking. I think that's where there are deep similarities, and that ability to system think and put divergent thinking. And I think that is a gift. And we can only have that because we have a brain that is, let's call it, more open. Yeah, it is less in boxes. We need to make more connections in order to sort of survive. Yeah, so we need more time.
Exactly.
I mean, for example, I just laugh at you because I have my piano here in the background. And yesterday, yesterday was Sunday. I was actually going to do something with the pianist, but then he had something else and he couldn't come. But I had started to prepare the music, and I was like, I have 2 copies, one for the pianist, and there were just 3 pages for him and 3 pages for me. And I swear, I know I copied 6 pages. I could find one complete copy and the other one, page 1 and page 3. And I was like, I turned everything around and I was like, this can't be, it can't just have disappeared. And it's that kind of thing. It costs so much energy. And then before I would have beating myself up and like, how can you be so disorganized? How can you be? And then I said, what, one, he's not showing up today, so don't fret if you don't get that. 2, you have a copier in your office, so if the middle part is missing, just go, and copy the second page again, and I'll bet you find it the day you made that copy. But it's just to laugh at ourselves and just say, what, just never mind.
Right. And that's, self-acceptance is such a huge part of what we're both saying. Accept that you have these things, and that these, I'm using air quotes for Sarah's listeners who can't see my hands, but these things make you unique and special, but they also come with some hindrances sometimes. And so you need to understand how to govern yourself and how to learn to accept. Sarah, I don't like that I'm so sensitive that I can't watch the news. Yeah. I don't like that about myself. I think I should be involved, a world citizen, and yet, you know what? It breaks my heart too much. And there's time.
But for me, when I hear that, and I've gone through these same conversations in my head, right? I think, how come you can't just sit there for hours and not let it bug you? And I'm thinking, that's the wrong question to ask. Why should I sit there for hours and let it bug me? I can find out in 5 minutes what's happening on a high level, and on anything else I need to know in more depth. I'm a great researcher. I could go and say, okay, I need more info on this and this and this. I want it from 3 or 4 different sources so I can figure out where the middle is in all of this. And I'm done with it. I'd rather be doing things that I walk away from feeling good. And so for me, that has been my challenge. And I don't want to say challenge, but it's really an awareness and a rigor to paying attention to what's getting my attention. Like, what am I allowing to have my mental space? Because for me, if I am really rigorous about what's my intention about what's coming in, I can feel. It's ironic. I don't express my emotions well, which is a whole Enneagram thing, but I can feel them, and I can feel when something's wrong. And I'm thinking, okay, let's just remove yourself from this environment. Let's see, go out in nature, go breathe some fresh air, do something. But it's that rigor. And I'm thinking, okay, You know, I'm old enough to know when the news came in paper at the end of a day. And for an hour tonight, maybe 2 hours tonight. Now, honest to God, that's plenty. I don't need a 24-hour news cycle to tell me the world's going underneath, because I need to hear people who are telling me what's going well, that there is hope, that there are people doing research like the two of you, people who are caring for other people. I need to talk with people who are like, well, we got this. It may be messy, it may be hard, but we're not quitting. You know, we love humanity. Let's just say that. Do we love all parts of it? No, not equally. Honestly, I don't know myself all the time. So, but I do think, Tamara, that whole thing is like, I should be able to do that. You know,
Yeah.
I should be able to ride a horse without being nervous. I'm thinking, sure you should. After having been bucked off all those times, you're never going to feel as comfortable as you did before those events. It's like, okay, it is what it is. So that's been a relief for me of just going, it just is what it is. And
that's self-acceptance.
Right. Well, that's taken a while to get there, Tamara. So when you say self-acceptance, I think that is so important. It's like, here's who I am. Here's what I've got right now. It's not all I've got. It's not all I can be. So, which is interesting because Jole has this hypothesis, and I want to talk about it a little bit because I do want Tamara's thought on it, right? We were talking about the Enneagram, highly sensitive people, leadership, like what is there to be known about that? Now, I'm not a researcher, so I don't do my hypotheses tidy. Jole does. So, Jole, can you explain like a couple of the questions we're kicking around? And then I'd like to hear Tamara's thoughts about, what else?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So, you know, since we all share the same traits, we all love complexity, right? So, the question here was, how can we make this complexity more graspable or understandable in terms of making it useful to people? And so we thought, since the change leader aspect is, you know, so much my thing, and to say, and I really like to stress that again, that, you know, you gave that question, Sarah, about how is society not working in the way that is good for either HSP or ADHD people? What would need to change? So to actually take responsibility to build a world that is better for all human beings, but definitely better for those that have a neurodivergent nervous system. So there was this, we wanted to come up with either a questionnaire or a way of saying, can you actually find out by, for example, saying, and I know there's a little bit of research on that, what kind of Enneagram types are also HSP, or are there types in the Enneagram that tend to be HSP, for example? Or another thing that I find very interesting is spiral dynamics. To say, where in the spiral dynamic spectrum is there? Are there clusters of HSPs? Do they hang around in either in green or in yellow? In order to sort of get a few other ways of looking at it than just looking at the neurology.
That is fascinating.
So that's something. Thank you, because Sarah and I were trying. I mean, you're most welcome to join us in that. You know, since you are, you know, you've probably done more of that kind of research, and how can one could build something like that can be useful, for example, for HR personnel or for therapists, or just come up with that sort of broad way of classifying.
Yeah. So my gut instinct, you'll understand why I just laughed at myself. My gut instinct says you're not going to find it in the Enneagram. I think it's equally dispersed through the Enneagram.
Oh, okay. Why?
Using myself as an example, I'm a type 8. I don't want HSP. I think it makes me weak. Now, I'm using hyperbole just to make a point, but a type 8 would not seek out this extra knowing and sensitivity that I carry. In fact, I see it a bit as a burden sometimes. And it clouds my decision making. And as an 8, I'm thinking, well, I wish I didn't know this knowledge. And isn't knowledge. And so when I relax and grow into it, I see myself as a change maker, bringing light because of this, right? But as a coach, I have seen HSP throughout all my clients. And I'm trained enough in the Enneagram to know my client's Enneagram without them. Well, they tell you all the time, even if they don't know the Enneagram. And so my suspicion is it's everywhere, not just the 4s who want to be HSPs. In fact, I've seen 4s who aren't HSPs. And you would think, well, golly, they've got to be HSPs, if anyone. And I've seen 6s the same way, who I wouldn't judge as on your scale. However, spiral dynamics is a fascinating. So maybe approach it. What does it look like to be an HSP and an 8? What does it look like to be an HSP and a 9, and so on?
But I would leave that to the 2 of you, because I barely know my way around the Enneagram. I know I'm a 4.
Well, the person in me wants to have a deep argument with Tamara right now, like, okay, I can explain that, but not an argument, but I just think it's fascinating. I think you're probably right that it is dispersed, but how it shows up would be different. Very
Yes.
different.
That would be very interesting to look at, in terms of supporting clients also. Like you said, I'm an HSP, but I don't want to be. Like, I don't struggle with that so much, maybe because I'm a 4, I don't know. But I don't know enough about it really. Because then again, we would have the same thing, that my thought that I have in the spectrum, and you probably do that in your work, is that if you have a client who's a 6 or an 8 or a 4, you would actually work differently with them. Because they have different personality, to tie that back to our discussion before. Base personality. And they need different tools other than the basic tools that everyone needs.
They have different preferences, I would think. And also, we have to take into account the subtypes, like, are they self-pres, are they social, are they one-on-one? So there's a lot of nuances, Jole, you're exactly right.
And the resistance is different.
Yep.
Yes. Now, spiral dynamics brings in a fascinating aspect. And I'm wondering and I'm just wondering along with you, with your hypothesis, I wonder if HSP may be present at all levels, but how one interprets in response to becomes different.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to find out, simply because I have a huge bias. So, my bias.
Tell me.
My bias is simply that you will find them in the green and the yellow, and maybe even the next, I think it's the purple, the violet. I don't know what the English word for that is. So that is my bias. But, I have, it would be interesting to find out whether it is actually just like in the Enneagram distributed. It's just that this thing that HSPs have about social justice, about, communicating, like we said, with those antennas, communicating with animals and plants. And, some of us will say, of course that plant talked to me, and others will go, with me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, there's things that just don't fit in the red spectrum. Maybe that's just a bias. I don't know.
By the way,
here's my thought for you too. We'll flesh out some of the questions, Tamara. We're going to involve you in, like, what do you think about this? What are we missing about this?
I love it.
But we want to start peeling back the onion on some of this, just see if there's some things that can be learned from it. And I will, since Jole's the official researcher, I will allow her, make sure we don't mess stuff up. But I'm curious. I'm curious just because I think it opens avenues for understanding ourselves and each other.
I love it.
Way though. Let's do it the HSP way. I'm not the chief researcher. I have a certain part of the knowledge, and you guys have other parts of the knowledge, and that's that.
Oh, heck, I was going to have you be the chief researcher. Okay, I will share with you, and we will pick Tamara's brain. We'll just see what comes of it, and it'll be like
I would love to be a part of this. Yeah, I would love to be a part of this. I think for ADHD, in the ADHD world, understanding more about HSP would be a favor to many of my clients with ADHD. And so, yeah, I would love to be a part of what you guys are working on. I think this is exciting. Yeah. And thanks for this conversation, Sarah. Thanks for bringing us together.
It was one of those things, like you say, I just thought after I talked to you, I'm thinking, oh, she needs to know Jole. And then after I talked to you, oh, you really do need to talk to Tamara. Why? I don't know, but you do. So here's what I want to thank both of you for. This isn't not the best time of day for Jole. She's ahead of us by hours. You're ahead of me by hours. So it's only two for me, but it's later for her and later for you. But I want to thank both of you because you've been so free in sharing your own experiences, the work that you've done that is changing the world. It really is changing the world. And for letting me kind of be along with the ride. And I want to give each of you a chance to say your last, whatever your thought is. It doesn't have to be profound, just something that you want to leave folks thinking about. And we will promise to bring this group together again. And then we will also let folks know as we go forward if there's an opportunity for them to get involved in sharing information or participating in a survey or however it gets designed. We'll come back and let folks know on the podcast. If you can't wait, reach out to me at sarahbox.com and just say, Tamara, Jole, I'm in. And we'll make sure you're part of our discovery process. So whichever one of you would like to say your parting words first, and then we'll wrap it up.
So Jole just pointed to me. So, first of all, Jole, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm so glad that Sarah knew we had to meet. I want to just encourage your listeners, if there's a listener who's been like, wow, I think I do have ADHD. And I think I've marked the boxes for HSP, and probably you've already Googled both things while listening to this podcast. I want you to know, like, yes, we have been talking about there's a burden, but there's also a bright side to it. And a lot of times, because I have my sensitivities, my challenges, I can really meet people where they are, and I can be light to them in a very dark world. And it is a gift that we carry too.
Yeah, I totally agree with Tamara. There's not really much to add, other than, again, say there's so much happening in the research world and in the therapy world and in the somatics, body somatics, healing world, be it with frequencies, be it with, trauma relief. There's so much out there now that can actually empower people like us. And so take hope, ask questions, reach out to us. Just know that, you might be more fragile in certain aspects, but we have a lot of power. We have a lot of skills. We just need to learn about it and be confident. And
well, again,
in my case, may just add that help to build another world rather than wait for others to build it for us. I think that's another important point.
Yes, there's no point of waiting. You might as well, it's the old be the change you want. Just stand up. Other people who will align with you will come alongside. Trust that. We're here together. We didn't know each other a year ago. There we are. So listeners, I want to thank you for hanging in there, learning some things, hopefully feeling uplifted and empowered about yourself, about people You've learned a little bit more about how someone might show up, whether it's you or a family member. And I encourage you, we will put in the show notes how to reach both Tamara and Jole. I encourage you to reach out to them, follow them both. They're currently doing important work, so you can learn more there. We will also put the previous episode links in the podcast show notes. So if you want to know more about Jole and the work she's doing, or Tamara, those will be in there too. So as always, relax. Just go to the show notes and get what you need. And we will talk to you next week on another episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. Thanks.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.